Somewhere deep in the heart of South America, legend speaks of a magnificent city, El Dorado, a great kingdom of gold, home to thousands, rising from the Amazon jungle with stone squares, grand plazas, towering columns, and carved statues. To most, it was nothing more than a myth. But not to Percy Fawcett. The 57-year-old British explorer was absolutely certain this lost world was real. It wasn't that far-fetched, those who knew him would say, to imagine that somewhere deep in Amazonia there was a major civilization. Fawcett was the kind of man who put his life on the line without hesitation, who would march into the middle of nowhere and do whatever it took to reach his goal. In 1925, he set out to prove it. Alongside his son Jack and his closest friend Raleigh Rimmel, Fawcett ventured into the jungle, convinced they were on the edge of history. They were certain this was going to be a great success, people said, and that they were all going to be very rich. 39 days into the journey, Fawcett wrote to his wife from deep in the wilderness, "You have no fear of any failure." Then all three vanished. This is the story of what drove Percy Fawcett and why, as it turns out, he may not have been wrong. There really was something extraordinary hidden in that jungle. But its greatest treasure was never gold. London, spring 1906. It began not in the jungle, but in a grand meeting room at the Royal Geographical Society in London. The Bolivian government needed someone to map its borders with Brazil and Peru, dangerous, unforgiving territory. They needed the best. They chose Fawcett. At 39, he was the complete package. His family motto was "Difficulties be damned," and he had lived by it his entire life. A first-class cricketer, an officer in the Royal Artillery, a former British Secret Service spy in Morocco, and above all, a highly trained mapmaker and geographical surveyor who could fix his position anywhere on Earth. The assignment was described to him plainly, difficult and dangerous. To Fawcett, it sounded like a dream. The romantic history of the Spanish and Portuguese conquests of South America, the mystery of its jungles, all of it pulled him in. "There were my wife and son to consider," he wrote, "and another child on the way. But destiny intended me to go, so there could be no other answer." That hunger for discovery had been lit in him since childhood. As a boy of 6 or 7, living on the Devon coast, Fawcett stumbled upon Roman remains in a nearby cave. The discovery made him the center of attention and fired his imagination. From that moment on, he never stopped searching for treasure. Into the Amazon. From 1906 to 1911, Fawcett made several grueling surveying expeditions into the Amazon. The work demanded extraordinary skill and endurance. Disease was everywhere. Fevers could bring a man down within days. The territory was crawling with danger. Fawcett was operating in one of the most contested regions of the Amazon during one of the most violent periods in its modern history. Hostile tribes, roaming gangs, people killing people. To most men, this would have been a nightmare. To Fawcett, it was fuel. But as the years passed, something deeper began to stir in him. He was no longer just a surveyor doing his job. He was falling in love with the Amazon itself. Deep down inside of me, a tiny voice was calling, he later wrote. At first scarcely audible, it persisted until I could no longer ignore it. Inexplicably, amazingly, I knew I loved that hell. Its iron grasp had captured me. By 1911, he had had enough of surveying. He resigned. Fawcett once said he preferred the company of so-called savages to that of civilized men. And those who knew him believed it. He was a maverick, an outsider, a man who wanted freedom and embraced the wild. What he needed now was a mission worthy of his passion. The stories begin. During his years of surveying, Fawcett had been hearing things. Whispers and rumors passed between tribes and explorers alike. Stories of an advanced, ancient civilization buried somewhere in the Brazilian interior. He didn't dismiss them. He collected them, piece by piece, fitting them together like a jigsaw. I had by this time heard in several places vague traditions about the remains of ancient civilizations, he wrote, and my imagination was stirred to such an extent that the urge to investigate was becoming more and more insistent. After all, extraordinary civilizations had existed in the highlands of Peru and in Mexico. Why not in the heart of Amazonia? Then, in 1911, something happened that changed everything. The ancient Inca ruins of Machu Picchu were discovered in the Peruvian Andes, the most important archaeological find in South America since the age of the Spanish conquest. For Fawcett, it was confirmation. If Machu Picchu had been hiding in plain sight all this time, something even more extraordinary could be waiting deeper in the jungle. Machu Picchu's romantic discovery was recent news, he wrote, but my objective dated much earlier than the Incas, and I felt it was to be sought farther east, in the wild, still unknown. The conquistadors' account. One story above all others consumed Fawcett, the account of Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana, who in 1541 led the first European expedition down the full length of the Amazon River. For 8 months, Orellana and his 57 men traveled downriver toward the sea, searching for El Dorado. What they found was astonishing. Densely populated riverbanks, roads cutting into the interior, towns, communities of perhaps 20,000 people strong, living in an organized, thriving civilization deep in the jungle. Fawcett was certain this was not legend. This was history, and somewhere out there, those cities still existed.